from Microsoft, 5 years back ago, and then he sort of renamed our org to Worldy, and it has stuck ever since. It's a catchy name. I also have Ritika with me here. So Ritika, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Ritika. I'm one of the engineers who is leading the internationalization space, and that's it.
Cool. So we're here to talk about AI-powered globalization, streamlining global product expansion with globalization-compliant development. So that's a mouthful. All right, just to give a perspective around, PayPal's global presence, right? So PayPal is present in more than 200 plus countries. We support 40 plus languages. We support 20 plus currencies, right? So globalization, it's a big deal in any company that is there in multiple regions, right? So it's quite evident why at PayPal we take globalization very seriously. So from just a high-level tech stack point of view, we have I18N libraries SDKs, which we call Worldy SDK. And that's present in all the tech stacks that we have. That's in JavaScript, Java, as well as the mobile stacks. All right. So usually, whenever a feature is built, it sort of gets rolled out to a select few markets to begin with, right? And then it's expanded to the other markets that the product is already available in. So generally, what happens is that the global expansion, right, in the absence of a sort of streamlined globalization strategy, global expansion usually takes time and is costly, right? And at times it can take, for example, 3 months for the product to sort of launch in 15 markets, right? So this sort of prevents companies from sort of going into those markets and thereby leading to lost revenues. So we're going to talk about some of the common globalization, tech debts that cause this delay, right? So again, let's take, for example, a feature that's getting built, and just for the initial launch, let's say that it's getting built just for the US market, right? So as a developer who's working on that feature, it might make sense for them to just quickly deliver the project, but they may be shortcutting a few things. Like, for example, they could be hard coding date, time, currency formats. They could be hard coding stuff like address and name phone validations, right? But then the business comes back and then says that, hey, we need to expand this to 100 markets, right? Now that becomes a challenge in itself, because then you need to custom code your logic for each and every single application, each and every single country, and then that basically involves a lot of spaghetti code. It's unmanageable, right? Like few other examples of tech debt is hard coding internationalization labels such as address and name labels. And expanding that to, let's say, 100 plus countries may involve a complete redesign of the entire layout, right? So that, again, becomes extremely time intense. Few other tech debts is, different product teams within a company may adopt different standards or libraries, right, to code their flow. So that may lead to inconsistencies in terms of the different address layouts. It could also, for example, have conflicting user experience whenever in a page or across the page date formats are shown, right? So an example of that is, let's say a product team within a company, for whatever reason, chooses Intel, right, INTL, and then another team uses Moment, right? So these both are used for different reasons, and then as a user goes through a flow of the product, they get inconsistent user experience, right? Also at PayPal, like we are heavy on compliance because it's a fintech-related company, and in terms of an example of that would be mentioning the currency code, right? Because in US, in Australia, Canada, dollars are used, right? So for us, it becomes, from compliance point of view, that we need to mention the actual currency code in it, right? Which is the USD, AUD, and other things. So whatever issues sort of I spoke in the past 2 slides, right? So those kind of cascade into the delays that cause these market expansion. For example, in this case, for expanding into 15 markets may take 3 months in time, right? So what is the overall sort of business impact that this causes, right? So there's an engineering cost involved, and there's a customer cost involved. So from a sorry, I just want to quickly go back to the slide. I forgot to mention one point here. On the research part, right, just want to double click on the research part. So the research part here usually involves product research as well as the actual implementation research. So an example of product research could be that, a particular flow could have, let's say, a user interface which needs to capture the shipping address, right? So generally, like we don't, as part of the shipping address, for many of the countries, we don't allow PO boxes, right? While there could be another flow, which is to update the user profile, right? In which case, we don't allow PO boxes in those cases. Deep diving a little bit more, certain countries like Kenya, right? They are heavy on PO boxes because they have not standardized their address. So all these different product teams within a company having to do this research, individual siloed research sort of adds up to that much of time in overall expanding it. So yeah, coming back to this, like what's the business impact, right? We have an engineering impact and a customer cost impact. So from an engineering cost impact, it's increased developer time to build the features, production bugs, and we all know fixing production bugs are an expensive matter, right? And then there is the customer cost, which is because of these inconsistencies in the standards, there's an inconsistent sort of customer experience, and which leads to unhappy customers, and potentially we could also get into brand risk issues, right? So the second half of this talk, we'll talk about how AI-powered globalization can sort of help in overall reducing the cycle time for market expansion from potentially like 12 weeks to come down drastically down to 2 weeks, right? And it's not just that, right? And then scaling it from 15 to 200 markets doesn't come with any proportional increase in time or resource, right? So that's enough of me talking. I'll hand over to Ritika now. She'll go over the different phases and with some cool demos as well.
Okay, so now we are in the second part of our presentation, which is more focused on the AI-based solution. Before we dive into solution, I all want to think about the conversation we have having with our product teams or with management on realizing them and convincing them why globalization is important. And every time we go and educate them, the question is, it's slow. So with the AI power solution, we want to ensure that we remove this bottleneck, at least in the conception of the developers and the people around us, that it's not slow, it's more like a necessity to ensure the global expansion, which is the real importance, is happening at very fast. So what we have done is we have divided our approach into 3 parts: foundation, intelligence, and action. Currently, we are in phase 2 in our development process, and we will be talking about the phase 3 that we have planned. So in phase 1, what we have is we have a lot of knowledge about what globalization is, what localization is, what internationalization is, and we have built an inbuilt SDK to support it, which is called as WorldReady. So all these best practices, documentation, we want to come up as a context for the LLM to provide better answers to it. These contexts are not limited with the documentation. These are also about anti-patterns about the globalization. Any compliance requirement that we always adhere to is not intuitive to the product people. We want to bring them to them. So this will become a foundation to train or to provide better answers from the LLM. Next part is we want to build MCP server. Think about MCP server as a more like a bridge between the LLM and your application to provide better results. So based on the foundation knowledge that we have built, this could be helping them to generate code which are global compliant. For the Figma, we are almost in the process of developing a Figma plugin, which would be taking a screen and be converting the labels for the components like address, name, phone number into the global compliant labels. For example, let's say if I'm started with US, within minutes, I could see the same layout design for European countries. And third is we want to give more context-aware recommendation from our end. And the phase 3 where we want to deliver at the end is to include these AI-powered solution in the as close to the developer workflow as possible. So the two things we have identified for now is like we want to integrate as part of the pull request so that these could be an agent and this agent would be the reviewing your code first and then the actual human in the loop would be involved. The second part is like teams around me and engineers have been using tools like Claude, Cursor to write the code, to generate the code. So we also want to incorporate the solution as part of the code generation process to ensure that from the code that is getting generated from these platforms is globally compliant. With this, I will be switching to the demo. Yeah, perfect. So the first demo which I've made is ready is about how we can use how to create a globalization policy MCP server. The aim of this policy server is to better educate the people around us to know what are the right best practices that they can follow. So with that in mind, I will be going over the process of what we have used to create this MCP server. So the first step is to put all of our guidelines in MD files. So I will just hover over one of these files. So as you can see, all these the guidelines is the folder which we have created, and we have architectural guideline, cultural guideline, localization, and process guideline for the best practices that we have. And each of these files has been written in such a way that it could be provided as a context. And for each guideline, we are also highlighting what are the best practices, what are the patterns, anti-patterns, and provide some examples to them so that they are sure that, okay, you are not supposed to follow it, but what else they can do in those situations. After these guidelines are ready, the next step is to create a MCP server, which is in very layman term, it could be creating a Python server. Let me. So we would be creating a Python-based server. So this is the MCP tool name which we have used, which is globalization policy. Here there are 2 or 3 things very important. One of them is the name should be very descriptive to what we want to do, and secondly, this part should describe what this tool is doing, so that when we are talking to us like GitHub Copilot, it's able to detect the right MCP server. Now, when a query comes, from the query we are trying to detect what kind of guideline are the user trying to do. And here I've written very basic code to do a pattern check based on the keywords of the user. Now, once we have identified it as if the user is interested in which of these policy, we provide these guidelines as a context to the LLM and with the detailed instruction to what the user should, how the LLM should be processing the request. So here is some example of the code, and now I will be starting the server, and the final part is to connect to this MCP server, which is the wherever it's hosted locally, we can just add it as an URL. Once this connection is being established, what we can start doing is we will be querying. We would be using GitHub Copilot or Cursor or ChatGPT or Perplexity for the query purposes, and that would give them more refined results. For example, here we are giving a query, what is the recommended practice for the date. Based on this query, it identified, it was able to identify that this was supposed to use this globalization policy tool. And this is a query, and it also given an output as a context to the LLM to further improve the result. So with this, with this, so whoever was not aware or it was not intuitive to them to use what are the right standards for PayPal, they would be able to learn more quickly and get the result faster. So this was one of our demos. The last demo that we have is for the sorry. This is our second demo, where we want to create a MCP server to better integrate with globalization SDK, which is already SDK that we use. So here the core idea is that many of the new joinees are not aware what are the practices or what are the tools available inside PayPal. So this tool can be used for them to be aware of these are the recommended practice inside PayPal. So following the same standard, we have put whatever the guidelines from our SDK were, we have created the LLM context. For example, here we have created guides for currency, date, name and phone. We have highlighted in each of the guideline what is the integration, like if it's a JS, then use the JS specific SDK. If it's Java, then use the Java specific SDK, and so on. We have also added some examples in each of them about how the import statement, for example, for Java script should look like, what should be the correct error handling, and all those minute details. And here you can see there are some examples that I have highlighted. The second part remains the same. We are creating a MCP tool. With again the same idea, whenever a user or a developer is making a query, we would be identifying what are the internationalization or globalization features they want to query for, and based on it, we would be using the guidelines to answer those queries better. So these are the LLM prompts that we have added, and then once we start the server and follow the same integration pattern of adding the LLM, we are ready to start querying. Here is one example. So let's say I'm creating a JavaScript based file, phone.js, and I start my GitHub Copilot in agent mode to create a React component that should be using country code, national number, and it would be doing two things: format and validate. It will the GitHub Copilot would detect, because of the tool description and everything, it will detect the right tool. For example, here it was able to detect that, okay, you are trying to use internationalization documentation tool. This is the query. And inside the query, we were able to figure out, okay, the user is trying to find more details about phone. Here's the guideline based on from our documentation, and they want to use JavaScript as the platform. And from that, it gave that much context to the LLM to start generating code for the user. So as you can see, it generated the code. So now it's a big win for us, because we don't need to go to the products and ask them to integrate with already SDK or follow the right practice. And from the code generation itself, they are getting the code which is globally compliant for them. With that, I would be moving to the key takeaway. From this session, I want to highlight that global expansion cannot be done without globalization, and the scale that we want to achieve and drive the adoption needs some AI solution, so to ensure it's really quick and it's not an afterthought in the product's life cycle. With that, I would like to open for questions.
I just want to mention one point is, like, the examples that Ritika showed, they seem to be developer focused, but the first demo that she was showing is potentially, we can have product owners, because many of our product owners basically make use of the Claude desktop, Perplexity, ChatGPT. So within the company, like, we have connectors that can connect to these MCP servers, and then a product developer could, for example, ask questions around, hey, what is the list of currencies supported at PayPal? What are the best recommendations for name formatting? or which, the example I was saying, like which of the countries you support PO boxes, for example, right? So all these sort of product questions also is something that we're planning to sort of extend to non-developers as well. I know we went a little bit fast. I think we finished like well before time, so I think we can take time for questions. So if you don't mind saying your name.
Okay, my name is Suni from SC, and I would like to know about your challenges of your doing that, the guideline or for that project, your challenges.
Like how did we create the guidelines?
No, I mean when you do that whole project of doing that for the.
Yeah. So luckily we were in a bit advanced stage where we were continuously talking to multiple teams and educating them that these are the guidelines that everyone should follow. So for us, we had a lot of documentation from experience and what the product problems they were facing that we were continuously documenting. So our problem statement was how to make them concise, that it makes more sense for the LLM to perform. So for that, we had a lot of help. We are taking a lot of help from from the prompt engineering techniques to fine tune them to ensure we get the best result.
And also one thing to mention here is like, this is not a replacement of engineers, right? So at the end of the day, the policy is like the AI tools that are there to assist you, right? But you are responsible for making sure that it works perfectly. So when the code hits the production, it's your responsibility, right? So these are basically tools that can speed up the development process for folks who are new or folks who just want to quick start their process for market expansion. I see one more question.
I was kind of curious whether you had similar checks that weren't AI based before, and what kind of false positive rates you're seeing on these checks, or how are developers responding to them when they see these checks?
Yeah, so this is, we've just sort of, as Ritika mentioned, we just did the phase 2. So we're in the process of rolling this out to the developers. To your first question, like we did have similar checks before this, which were mainly static checks. So for example, those were integrated into our PR validations. So they used to check both from a localizability point of view as well as from an internationalization point of view. So some of the examples for localizability were if there were sort of hard-coded currencies in content, right? Hard-coded, address labels and things like that. So those are still there right now. Those serve a different purpose. This is basically, for us to be able to fast-track the adoption of our SDKs much quickly.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation. I'm Jonathan. I'm a developer ops engineer. So my question is about, I understand like it'll using the MCPs and using AI, all the agents. I understand that it's going to make it faster. My concern is about what you're doing to ensure like the integrity of the data that you're passing through the AI. So I know like RAG will reduce the rate of hallucinations. Since you are trying to be globally compliant, then those guidelines, like I'm wondering how much margin you're thinking of, like how do you, like what are your like controls for that in terms of like data integrity?
Yeah, so if you remember the demo, right? Like all the phase 0, right? That was sort of the foundation, was basically converting our existing Volody SDKs into like these MD files which are LLM friendly, right? So that's where I think the loop goes, wherein somebody goes into Copilot, asks a query, it knows which tool to use. Internally within that tool, it knows which MD file to refer to. So it's that full cycle where we are hoping that, obviously we can't guarantee there would be no hallucinations, right? There might be some, but the MD files and the extensive documentation that we've built over the past 5 to 10 years is where I think we're pretty confident that the code base that's getting generated is sort of using the right patterns that we want from a SDK point of view.
Okay, sounds, yeah, it's just like, from my understanding of using AI in my own, at my own company, because AI is by design non-deterministic, so it's not gonna give the exact same response every time you ask it something.
Yes.
And especially since you're talking about like legal compliance, like I have experience with a startup that they are trying to use AI to analyze documents to basically be litigation grade, which in your case, it's not necessarily litigation grade, but you are still trying to, like, from my understanding, you're trying to still adhere to the regulatory rules.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, what is your, like, you're saying like you think that you've done like your best, but I'm kind of looking for a little bit more detail on what that looks like because of the design of the technology.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? So when we were talking about in the previous slides about being regulatory compliant, all those aspects are something that the requirements that we get from the legal and compliance team, right? They, for example, they say that, I don't know if you have a good example of legal or compliance that have come to us recently.
PO Box was a great example because we had two use cases for address. Like we had profile pages where we wanted to store primary address, and then we have shipping address that were more designed for shipping or like shipping. So the profile page or the profile addresses were supposed to be where you can verify the address where the person is actually staying. But for certain countries like Kenya, they had PO Box addresses. So we had to develop some checks extra for them. But for our perspective, the rules are very clean that for XYZ country, PO Box are allowed for certain situations. So we are not yet there where we have conflicting rules or not like, we haven't seen much degradation or impact on our performance yet because our data is limited and it's very direct.
Yeah, and the it's basically the query, if it gets to the right tools within the MCP server, then it knows which context to use. And from the code generation point of view, it is just sort of the right integration with our SDKs. And behind the scenes, our SDKs are making sure, like the examples that Ritika gave, that we are sort of compliant for, let's say, PO boxes in a certain country or not. So it's just that integration point is what is easier now with the solution.
All right, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Frank. I'm also a software engineer who works on localization solutions. And so from what I garner, it seems that your guys' globalization MCP is more for, I guess, double checking to make sure all standards are met. Is that correct?
All standards are met, yes, in terms of the integration with our SDKs.
Yeah. And so I was just kind of curious when this check occurs. Does this check happen like when a PR is made or like an MR is made, or does it happen earlier on in the development process? Because I was wondering if it would be possible to catch these things like maybe earlier on in development, maybe during the design process. For example, at my company or the company that I work at, we have like some checks and stuff that happen during the design phase.
Yeah.
And so does, so
Yeah.
you guys also.
Yeah, I think
So we are targeting multiple audience with this solution. The number one is UX, product design, because that's where maximum Figmas are getting designed, and they are the more not aware of what the globalization process is. So there itself we want to target it, where we would be generating our code for the developers. So there are 2 points we want to target in the Figma itself. One is generate the code from the Figma file itself, and secondly, deliver the layouts that are more compliant to the regulatory needs. For example, if it's in Japan, then the address should start with postal code, whereas in US it ends with a postal code. So all those differences we want to capture there. We are also looking into integrating with the conferences page, because that's where more of our technical design reviews are happening. So we want to mention that, hey, are you ready? Please ensure that you're integrated world ready, or these components need to be integrated world ready. And the third is where the actual developer is generating the code, which would be GitHub Copilot, Cursor, or other tools that we can think about. And this again is not a replacement to our existing static checks that we have put in place for ESLint, for example, for internationalization and localization. This is more to be, they are more aware about how the right integration should look like.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you for your answer.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. I've used implemented a couple of MCPs, and I use them quite a bit, and I'm wondering what the performance is like for your specifically around your are you blowing your context window out? And then have you looked at other tools as alternatives to the MCP, like skills or any other ideas to have something that it's a lighter context load, but kind of always on? Just curious.
Yeah, the second question, we haven't looked at those yet, so that's something we can potentially explore. It's primarily been MCP by MCP. To your first question, I don't think we've sort of run into issues of context window memory size. Right?
Yet, but I can definitely see
Yeah.
we might lead to this issue, but not yet.
Right.
We still need to see those issues.
And different sort of, for example, Claude, my understanding is that has a much bigger context window. So
It varies, right?
it
They
varies
also
between
display- Yeah, they can also show you how much context you're using. So
right. So, but that's a good point, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Cool.
So, hi, Alex, software engineer from Block. How have you dealt with like quality issues with what AI is like spit out? It's one thing I've had to deal with a lot. I've had varying, success with varying models, varying agents. So I was kind of curious, like, the biggest pain points you had to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the way we are looking at that is for AI to not, at least I'm talking in with context of what we are trying to do, right, with the SDK integration. The way we are looking at that is not using AI just for sort of code generation, right? That's one aspect, but also be able to generate test cases, right? I think with AI, it's more, you can do the full thing, right? So you could potentially start with the TDD, like a test-driven development, right? Saying that, okay, this is my use case, these are my input parameters, this is what I expect as an output from my test cases, right? So you could basically start off with your TDD, and then essentially go into, the actual code generation part. And because you can run this in an agentic mode, you can also sort of prompt it, saying that, hey, by the way, I have the list of all the test cases that I have in terms of what is the expected output, go generate the code, and also, after you're done, run all the test cases to verify that whatever code you've generated is up to the standards, right? So that's just a very specific example of sort of making sure the quality from a code generation point of view on our use case is one thing that we are thinking about.
Cool, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.